clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Brian, you know what I didn't do?
What?
This can stay in the show. I didn't look at his commercial. I got a phone call. We did the other recording, and then I didn't go back and actually listen to his commercial. So somewhere in here, I'm going to drop the audio of John
You're supposed to
Masterman's
listen to
commercial.
John Master. Can I play it and you can hear it on my computer? Will that work?
Yeah, you can try that.
Ready?
I'm John Masterman. As a transmission mechanic, I fix things. Something Salem politicians know nothing about, or countless Oregonians wouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck struggling to buy groceries. It's time to put no-nonsense, hardworking Oregonians in charge, to end mass homelessness, hold criminals accountable, restore educational excellence, and help families prosper. I'm John Masterman. I'll teach Salem politicians a thing or two about fixing things.
Paid for by friends of John Masterman.
Whoa, look at that. Hey, guess who we're
So
talking
good.
to, Reagan?
John Masterman. Okay, so John, you may not have heard this clip unless somebody sent it to you. But way back when we were talking about the campaigns early on, and we're like, John Masterman's logo should have a big wrench in it or something like that. But
I like
you
it.
might need to educate me. I'm not sure that's the main tool you actually use as a mechanic. What would you put in your logo if there was a tool that you use as a mechanic the most?
Oh, any handful of different things would work. A wrench might work, an impact gun, handful of sockets, just normal tools.
You have to be careful with that impact gun.
Yes.
We might not want to put that one in there. I'd probably go
Is
with
that is that
Well-
a fully automatic assault impact gun or
Well, you have to be careful with the terminology about what I do for a living because you can't shorten things up anymore. This district does cover part of Portland, so I have to remind people that I rebuild transmissions. No shortening of anything works anymore.
right. Yeah.
you're a trans mechanic means something different in
Yes, it
downtown
does.
Portland than it does in East Multnomah County.
Oh, it's so great. Well, which is
John,
truly one of the big differences in this race, but we'll get into that anyways. So go ahead, Reagan.
well, your ad to me is very much about who you are and the no nonsense situation that you have. And I think that is the main thing that I would say, especially, residents in your district are probably tired of. And a lot of people say they're tired of, but they don't always vote it, which is just being tired of the politics and their performance and the showmanship. I mean, this is something that's bugged me for such a long time. Democrats will run over and over and over again every election cycle. We care about small business. We care about the cost of living. And then all they do in the session is harm small businesses and raise the cost of living by just adding
Correct.
more layers of government. And they'll give you all kinds of good reasons why we should have those things. But at the end of the day, cost of living goes up and it's harder to be a small business owner. And I think that frustrates a lot of people.
Correct. Well, just simple day-to-day life. If someone passes a new tax on something, oh, it's just on those horrible businesses that are just raking in all that money. It won't affect all you little people. Well, yeah, it actually does because the business model has to work. Every time you increase your expenses as a business, you have to absorb that somewhere, and all it does is make the end user product or service, it costs more. So you are literally taxing yourself. It's just most people aren't aware of what they're doing.
Well, because you run a small business, right?
Yeah, it's just one person show, but I have most of the pieces of any business. They're just in a smaller form, but they're all there.
Does your gross receipts go over $25 million in a year so you'd be impacted by Measure 118?
No.
Okay, but do you buy anything from a business that does gross revenue of over $25 million that might be impacted by Measure 118?
Lots of things.
We just debunked my favorite myth because all the leftists on Twitter in Oregon are like, these ads about Measure 118 saying it will raise costs on small businesses. That's not true. It only raises the cost on big businesses. Basic economics lesson. If you have to buy something from a big business to run your small business, it did raise your cost. So anyway, I just wanted to cover that because I think that was annoying me this last week.
Well, I'm happy I could help by sharing a little bit of reality, because that's where I spend my time. That's what I'm all about sharing.
Yeah, right. I'd imagine all the parts that you have to buy to fix a transmission all come from companies that do over 25 million, or a lot of them. So
Yes,
all that,
indeed.
so that trickle down effect is now a new transmission that you're a rebuilt transmission, say cost you $2,500, is now going to cost you $2,800. Is just an example, but that's what I just don't think people understand, that trickle down effect it is real. And that's why Measure 118, there's a reason why even Democrats are against Measure 118. However, has your opponent come out against Measure 118? I kind of feel like she signed anything or said anything.
I personally haven't seen anything
I
or
kind of
heard
feel like
anything
she's
from her on
for.
this.
I think she's a yes on 118. We're just going to go ahead until she debunks that theory. I'm going to go with she's a yes, because she got money from Travis Nelson, and I know he's a yes.
Well, we have a video clip of her from her, I believe it was her League of Women Voters interview, where she was asked about the kicker, and she firmly believes that she could spend that money better on funding different programs than to give it back to the taxpayers as the law requires. That's our money, thanks, and I'd like it back.
Oh, I was reading her website and her priorities. And by the way, I would say that Wah Win is probably Reagan. She's in my top 5 of the top 5 most, like, you don't even knew they were a state representative in Salem. So she was in my top 5. She's not my number 1, but she was definitely in my top 5. And as far as, and especially for most forgettable too, because she just hasn't done anything. And I looked at her priorities on her website, and it's all about spending money. Like,
Yep.
everything on there is more money, more money, more money, more money. How do you solve homelessness? Oh, more money. How do we solve the housing crisis? Oh, government housing. Like, no, get out of the way.
The government isn't good at running anything.
Brian, the reason that you can't remember Hua Win, or here is my theory about it. She isn't even the only state representative with the last name Win. There's Representative Daniel Win, and that gets me every time. And I'm assuming people had similar experiences. Thank goodness. I think the reason David Brock Smith goes by Brock Smith instead of just Smith is because Greg Smith, he's just there, and he's just got Smith on lockdown. We have multiple Levies in the house. People, we need to get this sorted out, okay? If Emerson Levy had gone to the Senate and Hua Win and Daniel Win, one of them goes to the Senate or something, that or gets defeated, maybe John is going to fix this problem for us, right? We got to sort this out. 60-person legislature. It's not like it's a 435-person Congress, right? I can't imagine them dealing with Smith there, right? This is a 60-person House and a 30-person Senate. We should not have duplicate names. Okay, guys, we can sort this out.
Well,
sounds like a plug to vote Masterman to me.
I mean, nobody else has the name Masterman running around, and Reagan and I are already the Nepo staffers so, we don't need another Knope running around, and definitely don't need another Iverson. That's for sure. But the Win,
Nobody
and,
wants that.
Daniel Win, I will say that dude's got great suits. I mean, he wears some pretty stellar suits, and that's why I always remember him. But anyways, let's get back to policy on this. John, tell us, give me, I have a couple of different questions, but the big question is what do you think? And you've probably studied her record and what she's voted for and voted against, and where do you really feel you're at with what you want to do in Salem and what she's done in Salem? Like, what's kind of the key differences you think between you two?
Like I said at the very beginning, I live in reality. The folks that have been calling the shots and passing the laws here, they don't seem to understand financial reality or human nature at all. All these things done that get passed through there, they tear apart families. They make the cost of living go up. The average person in Oregon, and definitely in the majority, is hurt by most of what comes out of our legislature recently. My opponent claims to be an educator. Well, in 8 years as a Portland Public Schools attendance coach, chronic absenteeism doubled. That's probably not a great thing for your resume. During COVID, the graduation standards proficiency testing was suspended because the graduation rates were falling. And then last year, the authority to do that got passed off to the Oregon Department of Education. They suspended him for 4 more years. A bill was proposed to reinstate graduation proficiency testing, and my opponent voted against it. Well, if you're so big on education, then what's wrong with demonstrating that you were successful in all of your efforts? And we have a very high cost per student for education in Oregon and a very poor quality outcome. Something's got to give. More funding isn't the problem. You got to use what's there a whole lot smarter.
Isn't she on the David Douglas School Board, or was? Is she still on there? So
she still is, and she is employed by Clackamas ESD, and she's in an administrative capacity. She's not a classroom teacher.
yeah, so she's a state employee basically,
Yes, and has been most of her career.
and a state representative. That should be outlawed. Speaking of those things, but I mean, she's, again, like you just said, with education, I think that's really a defining difference between Republicans and Democrats right now. And Democrats' whole thing is, right, if they just say, if we just funded the QEM, right, the quality education, we just funded it at this amount, education, we'd solve it, right? Every kid would be great. That's not true. We could give $1 trillion to education in Oregon, and guess what? Our kids would still suck. Money isn't the problem. The problem is they're not teaching basics. They're teaching,
Correct.
Socialist perspectives. And I would imagine she's pushing that at the David Douglas School District.
Well, in 2019, the CAT tax passed. That was supposed to be the be-all, end-all of solving the problem of education funding. Well,
Yep.
Guess what? We need more funding for education, they tell us. No, you need to use it smarter. Now, when she moved here from Louisiana, she got put through an expensive private high school. Well, that's great, but when a bill came up to allow that opportunity to lesser funded families, she voted against it. It's good enough for me, but not for thee.
Brian, when you said our kids will still suck, you meant their grades and their attendance, I'm assuming. Listen, it's going to get
You're
clipped.
clarifying for me for the
get,
lawsuit. Yeah, thanks.
I'm just leaving it out here. I'm just helping you out, Brian.
So many other things.
I heard it, but I didn't say anything because I knew what you meant.
Those were my comments, not those of soon to be Representative Masterman.
So this is great. Brian, under improving educational outcomes on Representative Wynn's website, ensure our schools are fully funded and educators have the resources they need. Well, she definitely failed at that last session because there was a bunch of teacher strikes and a bunch of school districts saying, actually, we don't have enough money to pay teachers. And I mean, it gets obviously to the money question, right? I think there's a ton of balloon costs in a lot of these districts in admin, but the school districts really need to get and school boards and their superintendents need to get that part under control, right? So I think a lot of this comes down to there's a person who's going to have to be, and here's the argument. Here's the argument for electing a Republican in a blue district, okay? Democrats, except for a handful that they can let off on the tough votes, are mostly just a rubber stamp for the agenda that comes through.
Oh, absolutely.
Republicans in blue districts who want to get reelected have to actually look at the legislation and with a critical eye and decide, is this good for my constituents or bad? You guys can't afford to just rubber stamp something. You can't afford to rubber stamp a right-wing bill that goes through because it may have stuff that your constituents don't want. You can't afford to rubber stamp a left-wing bill that goes through because it's going to have stuff that your constituents don't want. I would argue that Republicans in blue districts are going to be better representatives than a lot of the Democrats, not just for the pure balance perspective, which is obviously important for getting better bills, but also they're going to read more bills. And they are going to give arguments about why I'm voting yes or why I'm voting no that are better than a Democrat in a district that thinks they're safe, right? And so if all else being equal, I think you'll get more response from John and you will know his arguments because he's going to have to make them because Democrats are going to try to come after him every time he runs for re-election. And I think ultimately that's sort of the thing that I think voters, may not be intuitive to voters, but if you kind of think it through and realize what it means to be a Republican in a deep blue district like this one is. I mean, it's still got a pretty decent sized Democrat registration advantage.
Well, when I'm out knocking on doors and I introduce myself, some folks don't want to go any further until they determine what party I am affiliated with. And my response to that is, I live in reality. I am registered as a Republican. And almost everyone will still entertain some type of interaction after that, because most of the issues that mess with everybody, especially in the Multnomah County end of this particular district, they're not necessarily partisan issues. They are real world issues. I mean, if you walk out the door to go to work in the morning and someone stole your truck last night, do you honestly care what the party affiliation is or the people that are in charge? No, just fix the stinking problem. So
I do. I would want to know if somebody defunded the police though before my truck got stolen. Actually, I would want to know that.
Well, that's a perfect segue into more of the differences between myself and my opponent. Has anyone thought that the soft on crime approach is working really well? District Attorney in Multnomah County, Mike Schmidt, got blown out pretty hard by even the Portland voters this last time, all of Multnomah County, and my opponent endorsed him. So you figure it out from there.
Yeah.
If there's no consequence, is there really any law at all? You know, you got to have some basic respect for law and order, or everything else is chaos.
More evidence of just kind of being a rubber stamp for whatever's being put forward, right?
I couldn't find any time where she voted against her caucus ever. Even in the Willamette Week endorsement interview, they brought up that she hasn't done anything to differentiate herself from her caucus. She's just go along to get along on an agenda that just doesn't work for people that live in the real world.
I love the shape of this district too. I'll try to link this in the show notes. It's like you've got Damascus, a little bit of Happy Valley, just, it's got that area south of Gresham, a little bit of rural area, and then to ensure it's blue, we're gonna grab Powell Boulevard in Portland and Southeast 122nd. It's just hilarious.
I describe it to people as you have rock solid city on one end, and you go to the other end, you keep your city away from me.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I grew up in this area, Gresham, as people know me, right? Brian G. Iverson, they call me Gresham now. Reagan does on the podcast. But we used to go, out to Clackamas Town Center all the time from Gresham, and you drive out Foster Road, and we go to I grew up going to the Foster Road Drive-In, which is no longer there. But this is like that area of the homeless explosion really got hit hard. Like that's where every crappy RV got dumped to the side of the road, and it was just miles of trash that I'm sure is still there, John. And I would, because homeless has to be the number one issue, I would imagine, in your district, right? Just the homelessness is just insane.
Well, homelessness and crime, they pretty much tie at the top because they're on everyone's mind. You can't escape it. You can't not see it. And these people live there. It's right there near their home. And as far as Foster Road goes, it does get cleaned out once in a while, but it goes in a few months cycle. Clean everybody out, clean up all the garbage behind, and within a week or two tops, they start popping back up again. There's a whole bunch of fresh new residents on the side of the road here this last week.
It's crazy. I think the homelessness stuff, I believe, is what really the undercurrent is. Like, you can't just vote to recriminalize hard drugs. Like, of course she voted yes. Everybody voted yes because it was so apparent that you had to vote yes, but that doesn't solve homeless. Now all they want to do, there's a desire or a bill coming. I know that they're funding. They want to have basically stabilizing funding for homelessness. So there's just this like baseline $1 billion or whatever the number is going to be to keep giving out blue tarps to people so we can just constantly have this homeless industrial complex within Portland. And that's not how you solve homeless.
Well, here's the kind of logic that I've observed. Multnomah County spent $12 million to go buy tents and tarps. City of Portland had to set aside $8 million to clean up tents and tarps, among other graffiti issues. Now, you can't be the destination resort for homeless and then say we need more money to solve the problem. Now, if somebody wants to not be on the streets, there should be a path to help them out of that. But at the same time, I can't say, hey, Brian and Reagan, I'm going to spend your tax dollars to buy someone a house when they won't even make the agreement to get off drugs and play by some rules. I can't do that. Somewhere in there, you have to have a little tough love because you can't hold all the taxpayers hostage by the people that just don't want rules. You can't do that. It's not humane to anybody.
It's a guaranteed jobs program, John. You pay Brian Iverson to dig a hole and you pay Reagan Knope to fill it.
Yeah, but I have to turn a profit. I don't work for the government. I have to turn a profit. I have to produce something. Otherwise,
That's
I
right.
don't eat, or I become homeless because I can't pay my mortgage.
Taxpayers are on the hook for
dang.
both of our salaries. Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
right. I forget about that part.
Remember, I live in the real world. I don't understand government very well.
Yeah.
If I run out of money, I got to stop buying things. Kind of a simple deal.
I hear you. Well, John, how can people help? Where can they find you online, and what do you need to? You just need Republicans to turn out their votes. I guess you need to make sure you get that 20-25% base vote in the tank. But where can people find you?
Vote for johnmasterman.com. Vote FOR. And as you mentioned at the beginning, yes, it is good to have some funding on this. Just a note, the other side has to be running scared. Yesterday, they bought $300,000 of advertising.
Whoa.
So somebody send them a diaper. They got some issues going on. Their camp is scared. Anyway, I'm trying to be all polite and professional, but yeah, send them a diaper, please. They're gonna need it.
Well, I love your district. I loved it 2 years ago, and I'm glad everybody else is seeing what we saw a couple of years ago, John. So best of luck, and go win.
Doing my best.